Hi there. How are y'all doing? This is Chris McCauley. Well, today I finally saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, you'll tell me, ugh, dude, you waited way too long to see that movie. And you know what I say today? You're right. I waited way too long to see this sucker. So, the quick backstory on this is that about a year ago, I was on Amazon and I had some why not money, and I decided to invest in a few movies that I hadn't really seen, but that I had heard were really good and really movie worthy. And so I picked up the box set of the Indiana Jones movies, and I finally saw the first one today, and let me tell you, it was a worthwhile experience. You know, I knew this was going to be a good ride when I realized that the movie actually held my attention, and that I didn't even get up until about an hour and a half to pause the movie, and that was only because I needed to go to the bathroom. But enough about that. My point is, it gripped me that well. And this is a movie from 35 years ago, and I'm astounded. Now, granted, there were a few things that, I guess could have gone better, but every single product has room for improvement. Even when we deem something perfection at the time of release, a little bit of time passes and then you're kind of like, meh, yeah, that could use a little bit of work. This film, however, is really only a few minor brush-ups, only a little bit of rust has grown on it, and it's really not even so bad as to say rust, just, a little bit of datedness. On the other hand, this movie is rather timeless, and I think one thing that contributes to that is the fact that the scenery is always changing, but it's not scenery that we're always familiar with. I mean, how many of us have really been to Nepal or to Cairo? Just to name a few of the main places that are in this spot, or especially in the middle of nowhere island. Now, of course, there are people in those areas that live there and have been living there for thousands of years. But for people in the United States in the domestic box office, there's not many people that have actually been to those places, and especially not as many in 1981 when this movie was released. So I thought a few things were kind of goofy with it. For example, Indiana Jones himself being afraid of snakes, and just out of everything that he's so good with, snakes. I mean, snakes aren't exactly friendly, but that's, I don't know. It just seems so out of line with his cool and calm nature with everything else going on. With his whole, I don't give a shit attitude. So, I thought it was nice in the beginning of the movie when it opened up in South America, and I saw the villain from Spider-Man 2, Al Molina, working together with Harrison Ford, or so you think. In the end, it turns out that Mr. Molina really is just going to deceive Indy of getting out. But of course, Indy prospers. He makes one hell of a jump, to which I would die at that point. So, I last about 4 minutes into the movie, if it was even that long. So, I have to give Harrison Ford props on that one. I honestly have to give him props on a lot of things, but, for example, this role was really nice, and for a moment you see Harrison Ford as a professor. It's a scene that lasts about a minute when he's teaching about history, and he's mentioning a few of his archaeological findings, though he's doing his best to not really dabble into just what he knows. But you can tell that he's given a lot of respect by the top men, or so it seems at first. So I thought that the storyline was compelling. I thought that the visuals and the cinematography were pretty stellar. I thought it was a lot of fun, honestly. I thought that it was a good mix of action, a good mix with sensibility. However, I also realized today that one of my favorite movies, Charlie's Angels Full Throttle, pretty much ripped a scene, if not more than one scene, straight out of this movie. But there was one scene in particular that really just reeked of it, and it wasn't just the liquor that was involved in this scene. It was a scene where these two women were in a bar in the middle of essentially nowhere. In this movie, in this Indiana Jones movie, it was Nepal, and they're going shot for shot, and you have this stare down between the two women, and they have some foreign conversation, and so I don't know what those words mean, but it's in the language of Nepal, and you realize that the woman that wins is the owner, bartender, whatever. She runs this dive, and you realize that she's the old love interest of Indiana Jones himself. So you know she's going to do pretty well. Now, I had heard in some other Indiana Jones movies, and I'll probably get to those at a later date, that the women weren't always the best for the spot, and so I wasn't sure how this one was going to go, but I did see she actually had some grit to her, some nerve, some kickassery, if you will, and I thought that was a lot of fun. And on top of that, I felt that she did a really good job of, being realistic, and especially considering this movie was released at the time it was, women were always gaining more rights. Not everything is fixed by any means, but it has been getting progressively better. And I thought that her participation in this movie was pretty great. It was a lot of fun seeing her come back from the ashes over and over again and really get herself out. I kind of liked how she took the time to, get drunk with the rival archaeologist, Belloc, and then, try to trick her way out with a knife and try to get out of this trap that she's in Cairo, but that doesn't last, obviously. But she's still trying to fight her way through it all. You can't win everything regardless of who you are. And so I was really getting into this movie. I thought that the scenes in Cairo in particular are pretty fun. I really liked the beginning, just seeing how Indiana Jones gets himself out of these tight situations. And in some other movies, I would probably say that it was a little unrealistic. And when I watched this movie, on the other hand, I thought that for about a second, and then I realized, well, this movie is a lot of fun now. I didn't, it was harder for me to be as nitpicky with it. And so while there were a few scenes like that, I don't know if that's really the case, it was believable enough that I said, okay, I want to see where this goes. I want to see more of Indiana Jones and his adventures. I really thought that the history on the Ark itself was much more fascinating than I expected. Going into this kind of movie, you're going to be finding a lot of treasures, and you're just kind of like, yeah, it's a treasure hunt, whoop-de-doo. But this treasure felt real. It felt genuine. And I really wanted to see what happened. And I wanted to get a better feel of how Mr. Jones was going to get this Lost Ark of the Covenant. And it was really enjoyable. I liked how he went to Nepal to pick up Marion, and even though she got in a little bit of hot water with the real bad guy, the one that ended up getting the original artifact burned into his hand, where he holds up his hand and it's like, ooh, my hand's caved in. Um, but he was the ultimate of the baddies, because at least Belloc had a soft spot for Marion, and while he was by no means a good person, he at least had a sense of humanity. This guy in the black that had a really freaky as hell voice. You know, you just knew he was what artists dreamed their caricatures could be. They wish that their portraits leapt off the page as much as this guy does. So you can tell that there's nothing that's really going to get him to change his mind, and so you know that he's going to eventually suffer not just death, but a brutal death. And I'll tell you what, you know, for this movie being PG, and you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing in my opinion, but you know, for this movie being PG, it definitely had some pretty intense scenes, and I love that. But you know, in terms, you know, I certainly, well, let's put it this way: the PG of 1981 is not the same as the PG of today, and so I really enjoyed it though. And one thing that I thought was kind of funny, and this is probably just more on my end of finding things a little more funny than I probably should, was when, towards the middle of the movie, when Indiana Jones and Marion are trying to take the plane to recover the Ark that was stolen from them. There's a lot of fighting going on through this movie, obviously, but this guy in particular, I call him Brawny Man. He's just standing there with all of his muscles and he's all built, and he's shirtless, of course, because you know he's too sexy for his shirt. And they go through this pretty brutal fight, and you know he's throwing about 70% of the punches, if not more, as opposed to Indy. And you just know that there's probably going to be something else that kills him, and then there is. And then you see this the plane blades, you know, they come, and you know, and you're like, oh God, are they gonna do it? And I think this is where the PG comes in and it says, okay, we're gonna show the blood, but we're not going to actually show the chop up of this death. Now, whether or not they could afford that, I think they could, because this was, after all, the team of Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and Harrison Ford. They probably could afford it, but at the same time, you know, this is no Freddy Krueger movie. You know, they don't need to show all the blood to add to the audience's appeal and all of the, you know, the gore, per se. Anyway, I thought it was pretty fun how Marion and Indy got trapped into the area in Cairo where they had just gotten the Ark out, and they were climbing back up, but then, they are out of luck. It gets the way out gets closed upon them, so they have to navigate through this swarm of asps. So some pluses about this movie, there's quite a few, but some particular pluses is that I was genuinely gripped and given my standard attention levels that are not necessarily at their highest in terms of focusing on one movie and sitting through the entire thing without feeling bored or anything. This gripped me very, very solidly. And this movie also was very fast-paced, but it didn't feel like that you were lost or that things were nonsensical. You felt like that this could actually happen, that people were this diabolical, and that there were people who dug up treasures, and that there were all of these beautiful and dry sites to visit, and these dynamic characters, and just the different environments of all these people in their sword wielding or their gun toting. And I gotta mention this, the scene where Harrison Ford ends the potential sword fight with the guy in Cairo just by shooting him. It's funny in both ways, because with or without this piece of knowledge where Harrison Ford was suffering from diarrhea and just was not having it with shooting this, and so they decided, after a comment, that you may as well just shoot the guy. Well, they decided to shoot the guy, and knowing that piece of knowledge just kind of made it really funny of how much control Harrison Ford could really exert over the way the movie went. But the other thing is that even if you didn't know that coming in, you get this sense of he really doesn't care about this guy. He doesn't even want to entertain like the sword play of sorts, because you've seen other times where he takes a little more time to get his opponents, his rivals, to get under their skin, or to get them trapped into another situation where he doesn't have to physically kill them, but something else can. Like with the Brawny Man, for example. He certainly didn't mind when Brawny Man got the chopper. And when I did watch that part, I was like, talk about a chopper! And I laughed a lot more than I'm laughing now, because at the time it was much funnier to me. But you gotta laugh at your own jokes too. So anyway, I thought this movie was a lot of fun. I thought that the scenes themselves really flowed together. I didn't feel like there was a dull moment. I take that back. Maybe there was one or two dull moments, but that's probably because I am a hard person to impress with these movies anymore. I take a lot more time to really look into them and to see, well, just how is it really? So that being said, there's one or two moments of probably just my cynical self, as opposed to anything actually detracting from the movie. I thought the movie was outstanding. I was impressed by just how, even with all of the hype about Raiders of the Lost Ark I had heard, that this movie, lived up to those standards, and it far exceeded my expectations. That is for sure. And so, I would definitely give this movie a high grade, and honestly, I can't think of anything that was really wrong with it at all. Like I said, anything that may have seemed dull was really just on my end, as opposed to the actual movie. The movie package itself was spectacular, and so if I was going to give this a grade, I'd give it an A. But you probably already knew that. I mean, it's been 35 years, and I've only been alive for 24 of those years, but, at some point, you end up doing things you never expected to do. You never expected anything that you're going to do before. And so, it's better late than never. Alright, this was very entertaining. This was a lot of fun. And I hope that you guys enjoyed it too. Alright, I'll see y'all later. Bye.